Now we look through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. That's one interpretation. I missed my turnoff, but I think what St. Paul or Apostle Paul was saying too was that the mirror is dim. It's a dim mirror. And we look through it, heading on Camp Bowie right here. We look through this dim mirror because the world is vanity. Everything we look at, everything we do is vanity. I think Apostle Paul's talking about that. He uses the term mirror. Now, he does say in other versions, they have translated it to, he says, now we look through a glass darkly. I think he's saying we see through this dim mirror a reflection of ourselves, that is hard to see for our own protection, because we can't know God like he knows us, or we can't know the level that God knows us yet until we're with him. So now we kind of halfway look through this thing that we don't understand. I was attacked right down that way, but I don't blame the guy completely, although it was over materials. So I think we need to grow up as people, You're supposed to give, So, I'm wrong, but also we have to look at how God sees the situation. And I was traumatized by a lot of things at the time, and I think it was out of panic. It happened literally like right over here, where I'm trespassed from, which I think trespassing someone, I can go down this way, get to the same area. Yeah, he had me go this way to make a point. See, God is leading this. But I think trespassing is wrong too. But we can't be trespassed from heaven, I don't think. Still there. They're playing Christian music there before it. That happened right there at the Batteries Plus, right outside that. I don't watch it. It makes me... it's a werewolf moment. But for some reason in my mind, I thought that they were giving that to me or something, or I thought they were being giving. They could have easily. Or even asked for it back. You ever tried that? Can I please have it back? Now, I did ask for my stuff back, and I don't know if, they're getting in trouble for that, but I have to suffer for it. More so. I think it's society saying, because we come from the Puritans, some of the laws come from that. It's saying, be quiet, be still, don't go for something so silly. But, God made man and he made woman. He made Adam and he made Eve. And by God, I'll make sure of that to prove that. I'll find a way that there's proof of that. I'm a pretty devout believer, especially in Genesis. And it happened right there, I don't appreciate that at all. But then again, I learned my lesson. It'll never be done again. Not like that ever. I understand if you're hungry and you take bread. I understand something like that. But I had to protest and make my point. Okay? So that is done. What's done is done. It's true. I lost Angel. I lost my kids. They're with the mother-in-law, or they're basically with Angel, and they're elsewhere. And we all sometimes we don't always stay together as a family for whatever reason. Maybe this is because I don't really ever see my dad. Maybe out of fear, or maybe it's out of anger, or maybe it's just because I don't understand completely, Honor thy mother and thy father. So I try to do it and being nice to others and living a respectful life and respecting other elderly and things like that. I still talk to my mom, but I think my dad knows that I love him and I care for him. It's just, he suffered through the divorce of my mom, And now I have to suffer through the divorce of Angel and be separated from the kids. I know they're out there somewhere. And I think you know that too. And I have to say this too. One time I didn't weigh the salad properly at Whole Foods, and a lady got in front of me, and I wasn't, I don't think I was able to make there was a big kind of ordeal over like a salad, like you make this, I was making salads and I was jogging like 6 miles a day. People don't want other people to kind of like hurt themselves, but we do that. We lose weight and we exercise, and we exercise because we want to impress the other person that we love, and we want them to love us more or to need us more. And there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think, but it gets older when you get into your 50s. I've had a good life. I got to have 3 children. That's the most important thing. I think I didn't birth the children. My wife, my ex-wife did, but it still happened. It happened. And for those 5 years, I got to see my boy grow, my girl, Elizabeth Grace, and I got to see a little bit of Gwendolyn Hope grow up, and it was a great thing. But I had to tell a story, My rib hurts now, I have to tell a story. And it's just the way things worked out. It's the way storytelling is. A lot of people get to tell stories. Some stories are more popular than other stories. But does that make, a difference? I mean, Notes on the Underground, or Notes to the Underground, or whatever, Dostoevsky, how popular was his stuff until it got exposed? Anne Frank, was she a New York Times bestseller? I don't think so, but her stuff was important. She wanted to tell a story. She privately did it. She got a journal. She wrote about it, and she said, even though all this is horrible, and men can be, like things can go really wrong, overall she felt that man was good. She could see the good in things, even though she was going through a Holocaust, a really bad, ooh, moon. Got my moon shot right here. Anne Frank got to tell her story in a very private way. It was discovered later and exposed. And hallelujah. She got to tell a beautiful story, and she wrote it down before they extinguished her like a flame. And I mean the Nazis. There's the moon again. I mean, these horrible people that wanted to extinguish a certain race for no apparent logical reason other than hatred and fear. It's wrong to do that to a certain people for whatever reason. I gotta admit, the Latino community sometimes can be in trouble, and we can all help one another to understand this. These border crossing stuff is just border crossing in every day, in every terms of the way. People do it every day to each other. They don't want to just open the borders. We don't do that. France doesn't run into England. England doesn't run into France, and Mexico doesn't run into Texas, and Texas doesn't run into Mexico without certain paperwork. Just like I'm trying to do deliveries for roadie because it's legitimate. But Jesus Christ was a border hopper. He didn't care. Went over to to Egypt. They just hopped the border running from evil. We got to think of that, the religious aspects. God always presents that when law is broken, there is a religious expression from God, even all the way to capital punishment, which is horrible because we know Jesus Christ died for our sins. And listen, this state big time supporters of capital punishment. Not all states are. Okay? Not all states are. Good movie, Dead Man Walking. Tim Robbins, go watch it. Sean Penn. Another good movie. And I don't know the director. I should know this. I wrote a review on it. A Better Life.
Chris
It's
fights.
about a guy that jumps the border to raise his family, and he has to suffer. Things happen to him because he's not here legally, but he still raises his family, and then they deport him. It's called A Better Life. I wrote a movie review on it for Netflix. I sent it out when I was in Maine. Later, I would come back to the trouble of people trying to cross the border and then being drowned. I don't agree with any of that stuff. I think it's wrong. It's just, we have to find peace. We go from one war to another war. We go from one thing to another thing, and it just manipulates. The whole monster, the whole werewolf of things just shapeshifts. It shapeshifts and manipulates. And then it becomes a border issue, and then it becomes, something that was going on in Afghan, connected to terrorism, and then it changes to another thing. I don't know. Some say it's just the way that things are, But we have to find peace, Some of these people are the hardest workers ever, and that's a good and bad thing, to a certain extent, because they don't get the full privilege of the American life, but they will, because we're all immigrants that came over here to find liberty and to practice a form of worship. That's why the Puritans came here, and others too, Spaniards and everybody. Native Americans even tried to do it while these other people were in their own home. We try to find peace with them because I got a little bit of Apache in me. Saying, okay, you take the tip jar, it's fine. I didn't purely take the tip jar. Never made it in my car. It reminds me of a little bit, if you ever seen Stand By Me, and River's character talks about it. How did they not know that he was gonna...
Chris Chambers,
whoever his last name was Chambers. He became a lawyer later on, and then ended up getting killed in a bar fight. But how did they know that he didn't take the money back to the teacher, and the teacher went off and bought a beautiful dress with it? And they don't know if that happened either, but they just deemed him a criminal. He represented the criminal, but then became a lawyer. Became a good thing later on to represent others. But he had to be deemed a criminal. And Jesus Christ died the criminal death, on the cross. Was deemed a criminal. Yet he was the Messiah of the world. But don't go taking tip jars. It won't make things better. I saw this thing on the news the other night about this lady, and she was tried, and they got her. She was protesting on a YouTube page, or it was something like that, TikTok or YouTube or something. And they were taking stuff, they were looting, and I think that's just good journalism. She was trying. I didn't see it all. I don't know her channel. She's a black lady, but she got in trouble. She stuck her neck out there. Quite an interesting thing. But when she was interviewed by the media, she of course said, do the right thing, and that's eventually what we're going to say. Eventually, we're going to say that, do the right thing. Of course we are. We're not robots. We're people that live passionate lives, and we're not always going to make the logical, rational choice for you, especially if we're a protester or a Protestant. Sorry. I know there's powerful people probably listening to this. Sorry, I apologize. But tough. It's gotten better, but there's times when it was pretty bad. But don't go running into the Capitol. It's not worth it. I don't think people really knew I don't think those guys really knew the outcome of what they were getting into when they did it. In a protest, you're overcome by emotion. 0.6 is down that way. I got 0.6 to go over there. Yeah, it's over in the neighborhood that way. always look through a glass darkly, then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. This late at night. Well, they want their luggage back. By God, they'll get it. All right. Let's see here. That's a corner of which house exactly? Uh-huh. Del Prado. Del Prado. These things take time. All right. Oh, that's interesting. The lights are not split. Like in the footage that I lost, the lights were split. It's very interesting. Kind of bringing this thing about Killers of the Flower Moon. There's the moon. Because Scorsese's talking probably about GBI, Georgia Bureau Investigation, even though he's talking about FBI, right? Because we're always doing that. Let's see, Welch is this way. I'm going to go this way, sorry. Welch is doing that because, no, not Welch, I'm sorry, Scorsese. I'm sorry about that. I was turning on Welch talking about Scorsese. We do that as directors and writers and, filmmakers. We're talking about something else, right? So GBI is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for the state of Georgia, but it's for a state. Well, you have the FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is for the country. He could be talking maybe about GBI. Now, the FBI was created, according to Martin Scorsese, because of these massacres of the Native American people on the Osage community in Oklahoma, because of oil and because of greed. So law enforcement supposedly were marrying these Native American women, and then they were also killing like crazy. So since they were law enforcement, they had to be investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? Which they're not always known to make, according to David Lynch, if you've watched Lynch stuff, they're kind of a little goofball kind of people a little bit, but they're not always, to make the right decision or whatever. So maybe GBI, which is Georgia Bureau of Investigation, is there to undermine some of what the FBI can figure out. Now, I don't know. The FBI has been involved with some mistakes. Weaver was one of them, right? Weaver's wife got shot in the camp area. FBI was on that. They ended up sniping her, and it was horrible. Because there's this locomotive thing that goes on with the government, just like David Koresh, the FBI were involved in that, because of how guns are handled. It was basically over marketing. It was not necessarily marketing, but it was over business. He was doing business wrong. He didn't deserve death because of it. You put an automatic thing in a gun, you don't deserve. You sell it, you don't deserve death. It's a $200 fine, or it's a $200. It costs $200 to put an automatic thing in an assault rifle. As long as you register, it's perfectly legal. If the government knows that particular rifle has an automatic device in it, then it's perfectly, legitimate as long as you pay the fines or you pay the fees. And that's not worth death. It's not worth being burned down. At least 25 children being burned in Waco. That's not worth that. Okay, regardless of how evil David Koresh was, he still didn't deserve death. And he ended up getting it, right? GBI might be around because the company that I'm with is run out of Georgia. And that's Rhodey. But GBI may be around to undermine maybe some of the stuff the FBI or ATF and things like that get kind of out of hand on. Like, you got to use your senses, like common sense. Like, what exactly is the issue? Is it over money? Okay. Now, what do you mean by what kind of problem with money? Is it bank robbery? Absolutely not. What is the issue at hand? Because they were talking about just stuff that was just technical business stuff and the training of weaponry. They do it every day at gun shows. Okay? Every day at gun shows. Every day weaponry is traded at gun shows. Assault rifles, probably automatic. Every day it happens. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, David Koresh is doing it. And yes, there's domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is happening every day, everywhere. But there's no thing in any clause that says domestic abuse, capital punishment. No, it's not the same thing. Right? It's wrong, but to approach with tanks and assault rifles and ATF guys and FBI and everything, Koresh had to take the fall. The place had to get burned down and children had to die so law enforcement gets the check. Down the line. It becomes like a little tiny Vietnam, where they have to admit that they're wrong. And I would like to hear that too on the Koresh thing. But a lot of times, even today, they don't. And there's some vloggers out there, I want to slap them on the wrist for taking the side of those guys. And they may have been, those vloggers may be doing that because they're smart. But, I don't, listen, I'm going to put it down. No, that's like a church, okay? They were still worshiping. Yeah, they were a little radical. They weren't perfect people. And yeah, there could have been maybe some domestic stuff, but there's no real signs of it. But they've done a lot of interview on Waco stuff. I don't want to get into it. But what I'm trying to say about Killers of the Flower Moon is I think he ultimately is talking about how authority can get militant to get what they want, and this whole locomotive aspect of if you get in front of the government, it's like getting in front of a locomotive needs to stop. And I think Biden would agree. It's Joe Biden would agree, and I think Obama would maybe give a nod too. But because it's ridiculous, and you see it on YouTube every day. They're pulling up, and this black lady gets shot in a Kroger parking lot over alcohol. Okay, the lady needs to probably take some time off, maybe go to therapy, get some, maybe something's going with alcohol. We didn't see the alcohol. I didn't see any alcohol in the footage, but that's what was going on supposedly. And she was pregnant. There's a little Waco that went on right there in the middle of a Kroger parking lot, right? And now a certain group of people have to say, well, look, our lives actually matter. We actually want to be alive. Even though a certain one of them towed my car, I still had to take, it's okay. But, imagine what the Native Americans really had to go through before Osage, before all of that, being marched out almost like in a desert for the Trail of Tears because of property disputes. Well, the government says, this is our property. Actually, no, it's not your property. It's never been your property. You're actually, because of the fact that I have Apache blood in me, you're on my property. You're a guest on my property. Everywhere you look, pretty much. You're my guest. I'm the one that's supposed to be helping you out because you're on my property, but we have to allow it to happen. We don't necessarily have to, but we're not necessarily Homeland Security per se. But listen, I'm going to tell you something that we will do as a tribes, all of them, from Navajo to Cherokee to all the tribes that you know so much about, supposedly, because it's in your history books. and even the Apache, which means enemy, right? My people, that when it goes back, we're supposed to be the enemy. And you don't know anything about the Apaches other than something in a John Ford film, okay? Which we don't appreciate, and neither did Marlon Brando. Their big hero of the method acting, right? But he didn't appreciate it either. So before you go off and say, wait a minute, you're a guest on our property, and one of these days, if I'm not mistaken, I think those tribal nations will gain a little more power. And here's one thing that I do feel free in saying. They will speak out. They have a new show on right now called Reservation Dogs. Not Reservoir Dogs, but Reservation Dogs, which I haven't got to see because I don't have cable and I don't really believe in it, but I know it's a good show. I know secretly it's a good show. And there will be a time when you will hear us speak out. And there could be a time where the land goes back to us. And I'll tell you this, though. Here's one thing I will say. The land that they do have will remain their land. And watch yourself. Because, I've seen these police shows where they go running back to the tribal community, and they have to ask the tribal leaders if they can go on with their little search warrants and get these guys for stealing gas or whatever it is they do. Whatever they supposedly do while they're taking from their earth or from their land. They better respect that. And we're going to see that in Killers of the Flower Moon. I know Scorsese's making a point about the tribal nations. I'm proud of him doing that. I know that he's prayed on this thing, and I know it's going to be a great film, and I'm hoping for Best Picture. But I want to see more Native Americans behind the camera. I want to see more Native Americans, out there. Of course, Johnny Depp being a Sioux. He was a Sioux tribal guy. He was a Sioux Native American. I saw the interview. I was there. Sioux Indian. And I'm glad that he reached the level that he needed for the voice. Marlon Brando was behind that, of course, a lot of that. And so is Deb, because Deb, he's recently had to go on trial for this crazy Amber Heard stuff, and that was just him being a wild man. But regardless, there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of Native American filmmakers, Native American actors that are really well known. I think Keanu Reeves, I think maybe he might have a connection to a tribe. The name sounds familiar. I mean, the name sounds like maybe a tribal name. I'm not exactly sure on how many of them do, but it's not a whole lot. And here's a people that have suffered injustice for a very long time, even still today. And Marlon Brando did bring notice. He protested with them. He did send his note to the world, or to at least Hollywood. But it's coming to a time when we may not have to ask permission for your studio. And listen, I'm a white dude. I've got Irish and English, but I got a little bit of Apache to remind you that, hey, these guys probably have a little more right. And finally, we get a show called Reservation Dogs, and it becomes kind of a big deal. Well, what happened to the 50 years before that, where they were just bad guys, on the horseback shooting arrows like some kind of cavemen or something, right? All those years we had to sit there and watch that, and then finally they get something where they can speak out and start speaking. I want to see this Reservation Dog stuff. I want to see this stuff. But anyway, God bless. I don't really know any tribal language other than maybe some of the movements. But my teacher, who was John Templin, coming out of high school, he devoted a big part of his life to living with them, studying them, and even teaching among them, in the tribal, the Native American lands. And he was the one, I guess, discovered that I may have a voice out there somewhere along the line. But I'm on that side of the true Homeland Security, which is the Native American. I mean, God bless, We'll see, though. It's coming up in October, probably October 20th, I think, is when it's going to be released. We're all waiting patiently. And listen, Italian America stuff, love it. I think they deserve it, too. We all deserve to be here. We're all here regardless. So let's all figure out a way to be respectful to one another, and our own respects, our own laws, and our own ways of looking at God and worship, and even Jesus Christ, who Papa Joe, who is half Apache. I had to do this research. I'm not even really for sure. We don't even really know our tribe. But he also was a devout Jehovah's Witness and loved God and loved Jesus Christ, and would pray over the mail because he was a United States Postal Service worker, okay? I'm kind of similar to that. I'm in the gig economy. I've done tons of stuff like Postmates to Favor to DoorDash to Uber Eats, all of that stuff. And I know that everybody, wants to follow the laws, you could say, to that extent. And I agree with that, okay? But I think I've been put in a situation just like Papa Joe was, who was my grandfather. When he had to move on, he met Claire because Ann Mitchell, the daughter of Margaret Mitchell, decided, to move on and divorced him, and he had to suffer a little bit. And I think he died in his 50s, So what I'm asking is, I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. And I got trespassed from your property when you're a guest on my land ultimately, because I have Native American heritage. But that's okay. I'll learn to deal with it. I was wrong. You were certainly not wrong. I don't know. The guy that got me in the headlock, he looked like he was maybe Native American too. So maybe he was just a brother trying to help. They do that kind of stuff, I don't know. Oh man, this is a long. How long is this country? 1776. It's been around a long time, a very long time, and it's still revolting even up today. Look at this shot.